104.5 The Team, your home for New York Yankees baseball. Joining us right now, Seth Everett. He writes for everybody, NBC Sports, Forbes. If you've read about baseball recently, you've read something from Seth Everett. Seth, did you get to see the Gary Sanchez effort last night? And if you're a baseball fan, how mad are you at the catcher for the Yankees?
Yeah, it's a big deal, and Aaron Boone needs to take a tougher stand. It's not something I'm passionate about because, let's face it, players do this. He is not an isolated incident. It just focused on him. I've seen it too many times to say that, I'm going to take a hard line on Gary Sanchez, but I'm not on all the other dudes. And then there's the Daniel Murphy and you remember David Eckstein, who used to run to first base on a walk? Why can't you just be in the middle? Why do you have to be super annoying on one side and then lazy on the other side? So yeah, I'm surprised. It's a weird thing because Aaron Boone talks about coddling these guys all the time, and there's times when you don't want to be coddled. So I don't know. I yearn for the days of the manager that is the disciplinarian. Give me Tony La Russa back, or Jim Leland, or Lou Piniella, one of those guys. Not these kids, Gabe Kapler and Martinez in Washington, and Alex Cora, and Craig Counsell in Milwaukee, and Torey Lovello, and Dave Roberts in L.A., and all these guys, they're 12 years old.
Seth Everett with us right now. And Seth, the weird thing that happened this morning, and I know it's a baseball thing, not just a Yankees thing, but they tweet out the winner of the Heart and Hustle Award is Austin Romine. Is Gary Sanchez a moving piece right now, or no?
I don't think you sell when you're in a pennant race. I just don't think you give up major leaguers for minor league talent. Could that be an off-season thing? Yeah. But I don't think you're immediately this isn't the days of Steinbrenner where they're get him out of here, come on, my baseball people said Ken Pope's bad, I need Ken Pope. I don't think it's that. I think this is an off-season thing. Catching's hard to come by. I would rather coach him. To me, this reminds me a lot of Yasiel Puig. Yeah, Yasiel Puig is a guy who is now, in his 5th or 6th year and hasn't learned diddly. He hasn't learned any mechanics. He's an awful student. But Gary Sanchez is in, his 2nd year? I just think we're rushing to just coach the guy. Get him to run. Make him do push-ups or something. I don't know.
Flipping to the New York Mets side of it, Yoenis Cespedes last weekend comes off the DL, but then he tells the media that he may have to have surgery that could keep him out for close to a year. And then the manager, Mickey Callaway, said he didn't know anything about it. Why is there such a disconnect there between the manager and the player within the New York Mets?
I don't know how to answer this without throwing people under the bus.
Go ahead and throw them then. It'll be fine. We'll have fun with it.
We'll use code names. Use code names.
Yeah, code names would be fun. Use superhero monikers for the people you want to cover their identity for, like Peter Parker.
Since Wonder Woman passed away, that PR department's been crap. No, Shannon Dalton, what's her married name? Shannon Ford. I knew her when she was a swinging single. But Shannon, she ran that show, and she was amazing. And Jay Horowitz is really just kind of like the emeritus guy. You know what I mean? He doesn't really handle the day-to-day, and I just think this was a colossal F-up for a franchise that. This is the second dumbest thing that I've seen them do this year. Did I tell you my Facebook one?
No.
To me, this is dumber than Mickey Callaway not knowing about what Cespedes said. Because that is a poor job of communication, but this was completely preventable. Do you remember when the Mets played the Phillies and the game was broadcast only on Facebook?
Yes.
Right? So I was at the ballpark that day, and I was visiting with Gabe Kapler. That was my method, my method of my madness. I don't go to Citi Field for fun. And I was there, and I noticed in the press box, the monitors were all showing the Facebook coverage with the comments. So I thought that was funny, and I said, wait a minute. I said, but if it's on in the press box, it's on in the concession stand. So I walked out, I walked to the tunnel, I walked down the third base line, and I went to the concourse where they're all standing online watching this game with Facebook comments that say, Syndergaard blows. Mets can't get a real pitcher. Mets stink. And I'm like, can somebody shut that off?
Seth Everett with us right now, 104.5 The Team.
And the epilogue of that is, do you think a fan who goes to the concession stand and says, oh, my experience at Citi Field was ruined, the monitor was off at the concession stand? Right? Like, does anybody say that? Not a person. There's not a person who calls and complains. But yet, this franchise does not know how to get out of its own way.
Right, and now with Sandy Alderson, his health making him step aside, they got some kind of like three-headed monster in the GM office. Like, what do they have to do to get this right? Is there a specific hire? Is there how do the Mets get out of their own way?
Well, I mean, it comes down to ownership, and the thing that I have always thought, and this is now a personal thing because this is a clue into why I left, is I think the people who work there are sycophants. Like, I just think that you either buy in hook, line, and sinker, like, oh, well, that's our lot in life, and that's how you do it, and you're just so enamored from being there because you have this adoration for that franchise that you look past a lot of things. I don't operate like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm too honest. And I hate to say it, I have too much integrity. And what I think is going to happen is I think they need to go outside the organization. It's not to say that John Ricco, J.P. Ricciardi, Omar Minaya, all three people who I have good relationships with, it's not to say that they can't do the job. But I think they are part of this nebulous puzzle. And I'm not calling any one of those guys out personally, but everything that happens with the New York Mets gets leaked. Everything is on Twitter. Wilmer Flores was crying on the field because of Twitter.
Right.
What was the source on it? You think the reporters made that stuff up?
They were still taunting him at Yankee Stadium this weekend, like making crying sounds when he got up the hit.
I would just bring in someone fresh, someone new, and someone with a good hold of the modern day, baseball's ruined analytics, and do it that way. You know what I mean? And do it like the Phillies are doing it, or do it like the Braves are doing it, like just clean house. And that's not to say those three guys, couldn't be competent GMs. I just think they're part of this nebulous Mets malaise that they, that's what I think the franchise needs. And I don't have any faith that the ownership will do the right thing. Here's a perfect example. David Stearns, the GM of the Brewers, is a lifelong New York Mets fan, questioning his judgment immediately. And that's a joke. That's a joke, Met fan. I don't think you should crap on Twitter.
Send all angry emails, too. No.
It's a joke. It's a joke. But anyway, David Stearns, right? He was considered one of the hottest young executives in this new sabermetric world, right? He would have given his right arm to be the GM of the Mets. They hired Sandy Alderson. Now, I'm a Sandy Alderson guy, so understand the context in which I'm saying this. But they hired Sandy Alderson because he was Bud Selig's pick to help stabilize the Mets when they were going through the Bernie Madoff situation. And they didn't go through for the hot young GM. Meanwhile, David Stearns is considered one of the hottest executives. He's going to be a finalist for Executive of the Year. Twice with a subpar roster, he's gotten a team to be in a pennant race. The Brewers have a legitimate shot at winning the NL Central. And they probably won't, but I think they can. And that's David Stearns. And all that is development, that is young people, that is young pitching, and the occasional big signing, Lorenzo Cain, Christian Yelich, blah, blah, blah. That's what the Mets want. And the Mets are in this precarious situation because they don't have this person in place, and I don't have any faith that they will hire the right person anyway. How do you have somebody with an interim tag trade the ERA leader in the National League?
Right.
You can't. And if they thought, Syndergaard, which, by the way, when I told you guys when I first started coming on your show, that Syndergaard has a 10-cent head, right? Easily, I was told when he was in the minors, one of the dumbest human beings you'll ever know. And that was the scouting report. And everything he has done is dumber than dumb. And this is a guy who, again, we saw what happened with the New York Daily News yesterday. I take exception when people take shots at the media. I am very pro-media. This is an industry that's in crisis. We all know it. And I take this stuff very seriously. And Noah Syndergaard blocked me on Twitter because I got into that spat with him, all because he was denigrating to the media. And that was a time when he refused to get an MRI and caused himself to miss 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's dumber than dumb. And this one's going to top it. So it's one of those circumstances where if they had any faith that Syndergaard could turn into a perennial Cy Young contender, they would trade DeGrom, but they don't. Right. And that's why I think they can't.
Seth Everett with us right now on 104.5 The Team.
And Seth, earlier in the month, people were talking about a potential rule change in Major League Baseball to eliminate the shift. What's your take on it?
Well, I would have done it years ago. I'm on record as saying that. I've spoken to Rob Manfred about it. I think it's at least give baseball a fighting chance to return to its former glory. And I'll give you the case in point. As a result of the shift was instituted by the Tampa Bay Rays, and when the shift was first initiated, the idea was they were daring these sluggers to take the barrel of the bat out of their hands and just do little nubbers to get little infield singles. And no one did that. What instead happened was they learned and developed a statistic called launch angle. And launch angle is the arc in which the bat crosses your body. And what I was told by a scout, I was having lunch at Citizens Bank Park, and a former pitcher. Remember Aaron Seeley?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So he's a scout now, and he was having lunch with two scout buddies. I'm not going to give their names, and they knew I was in the media, so they were holding their tongues, when they were telling me this information. But they told me that two teams that they were actively scouting teach on the minor league and major league level that launch angle is the number one priority of a hitter when he steps in the batter's box, and contact is number two.
What?
And when I heard that, I said, they're teaching this? He said, yep, they're teaching this. And the idea is that you'll take the strikeout because what you want is that if you're going to hit the ball into the shift, it's an out anyway. So what's the difference? The difference is you're starting to see the sport have 3 of the 4 months of this year's team has more strikeouts than hits. And I'll give you a crazy stat. And Jason Stark wrote this in The Athletic, and I'll give him the credit because I couldn't do this kind of research. But if you project this season, so let's just say it's halfway over. So if you multiply every number times 2, like just duplicate the first half to the second half, baseball will have 10,000 less balls hit in play than 2009.
Wow. Why is that okay?
So we're not talking about the 80s. We're not talking about the – I don't need the old man that says, oh, baseball was better in my day. That's not that. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about traditionalist versus modern. Baseball to me is in a crisis. This is a full-on crisis. And I thought it was condescending because I know he's smarter than this. But when Rob Manfred opened his address to the baseball writers at the All-Star game, and his first words were, well, we cut the time of game down by 5 minutes. And I'm like, who cares? No one went to see Avengers and said, boy, that was long.
Right, true.
No, they said it was action-packed, you couldn't get enough. And, I'll quote Stark from that article, and he did a podcast with me about this, and he said, baseball is a thinking man's game. No one is denying that. And that is probably what got me personally to want to cover this in the first place. I became a baseball broadcaster in 1996 because I was fascinated with the thinking part of it. Because I thought, and this is no disrespect to football, but I thought sports radio on baseball was more intelligent. I just did. I always thought that unless you could break down a defense, you were just talking about guys, which 300-pound guy was stronger than the other 300-pound guy. And I thought the intelligent sports talk, this was in the 90s, was baseball. And now you're in this position where there needs to be more action to complement this thinking. You have, dozens of throws over to first base, yet nobody steals bases anymore because you don't want to sacrifice outs. And the millennial mentality is we just need a manager who will implement all this data. I am in the process of, as soon as I hang up with you, I am posting 9 podcasts from the All-Star game, right? And there's one, I think it's episode 162, Wilson Ramos of the Rays, where he says there is so much data. There's so much analytics. There is so much information. And after the interview was over, I hit stop, I shook his hand, and I go to walk away, and he grabs me by the arm, and he goes, so much data.
Seth Everett, man, dude, we need to call you way more often because it just gets the wheels turning, and we appreciate you. And man, if we could fill an hour with you easily.
Oh well, hey, listen. Have your PD, get a sponsor. Let's do this.
Well, you assume we have a PD.
See you later. See you later, Seth.
Seth, you just make guys nervous.
Yeah, we'll be careful on that. That's right.
Seth, man, always good talking to you. We'll definitely be bothering you very soon.
You got it, guys. Thanks for having me.